makes decisions, like everybody in this room has made a decision today to voice, to support women, it's very appreciated. It's appreciated too, because the fact is that I'm going to go ahead and say we, because almost every woman I talk to, they just get tired of having to fight so hard to talk, just to talk and to share their perspectives, and it's valuable, and it's getting lost. So the fact that there's others who will support them, and I'm not saying like support without reason, like absolutely criticize, absolutely question, things like that, but to just outwardly shut people down just because you don't like, that happens on the daily. Thanks for letting me talk.
Really quickly, just wanted to say good morning to the...
Doing pretty good. Happy Friday Eve, y'all.
Happy Friday Eve is great.
I have to play these head games with myself in anticipation of the weekend.
Yeah, everybody here, I hope you heard that. Oops. I hope you heard that. Just thank you, everybody. Just thank you for supporting the women and everybody, and the fellow men who are willing to listen. Just thank you.
I mean, Kristen, I'll be honest, highly respect the moderators in the room, and, I know how to act and, behave when I'm in a room where, like, this kind of stuff really matters. So I think that's kind of it,
I mean, I'm here to learn but more than anything, to be honest with you, and I learned a shit ton of this conversation. I had no clue. I mean, I heard random things. I didn't know really what they meant. I never really looked into them, and you just explained a lot to me. I thought it was super helpful.
George, I sent you an invite. I see your hand raised. Good morning.
It takes you places. It's a good teacher and a good learner.
How are you doing, Akima?
Pretty good. How about you, Kristen?
I'm good. Or Devin, or my friend, if you guys have anything to share.
Serendipity. Do you realize that that interaction with Jarl this morning is the most contentious interaction that this room has had in like a week? That says a lot about this room, because that wasn't very bad, and that's literally the worst that we've had. Isn't that crazy? This room is super chill.
That could be a good or a bad thing, Mike. We got to give the people what they want to see.
That's true. Depends if you're going for audience size or
Charles, in spite of Charles' extremely critical opinions of me when I have never been anything but hospitable to him, Charles is always welcome to come on this stage and spit his opinions.
I just wouldn't leave it at melanated people. It is it playing this, putting herself out there and stating such a thing. But I want to push back on that, so to speak, because I definitely hear white people supporting idiotic ideas. So,
harboring these young girls, and I'm not saying that white men or white people aren't, and we don't have our criminals in the sex trafficking and rape area. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying the UK and the UK media has specifically noted that the groomer gangs are these immigrants, and these immigrants are just so happen to be brown-faced folks from, Muslim countries and African countries. But I think the groomer gangs specifically are these kind of Arab Muslim types.
I guess it's just the last person one interacted with, which leaves an impression. I hear white people recently say pretty, it's basically leftists that I find supportive of these things. I mean, most of the population must have elected these people to government, and many of them, most of them, I don't know what the population breakdown is in Great Britain, but crimes.
I think the African American community has been voting leftist for decades, as far as I understand, by huge margins.
But nobody here is that stupid to fucking, hey, let's start bringing this up. It's like a cultural issue. This is not a debate. It's not about race. It's not about the color of the skin. It's about what kind of culture are you accepting in your fucking country. And it's disgusting that we're not saying, hey, let's prosecute these people. The UK signed into a stupid treaty in the 1960s that prevents them from being able to deport any of these people. But that's part of the bigger problem. Germany and all these other countries that fucked around and found out because they were colonists and imperialists. It's like, hey, you fucked around. Now people are saying, hey, you have to really have a responsibility too in your own country. And it's a shame because 2 years ago I wanted to work in fucking England, but this kind of shit just kept coming up, and I was like, okay, you know what, in the fucking UK because it's disgusting like that. And I'm not saying you people is disgusting. I'm saying the culture has collapsed, and you no longer have safety. You have people being harassed, and like that little Scottish girl, that little fucking Scottish girl who's like, yo, I got a knife and a little pickaxe. When it comes to that, that's when I've had enough.
Job, the amount of taxes in the UK, you probably walk away with about 180,000 a year. It's like fucking insane how much they're taxing people on like variable rates. So if you like earn more, you get taxed more. It's like, but it's like insane amounts of it. It's fucking crazy. But yeah, I hate this in this country because she said, for all I care, like burn the hotels down or whatever on social media. Like that case is obscene. Got sentenced to prison for like 31 months and rapists are getting out like in 24. It's a completely backwards with our daughter growing up here.
I'm just interjecting real quick. Hey, Io and Dr. J, welcome to the state.
Yay!
So the chat, Celeste, I would say, I don't even know. I don't know if it's incompetence at this point or if it's on purpose, but it's getting pretty close to like, being on purpose at this point. It's just like obscene what's going on here. And I mean, it's the thing, it's the British people are at the end of their rope. They're not taking it any longer, and this is why we have like nationwide protests every week. I mean, if I don't mean to go back on the grooming gang things, but there's an independent report on it saying that there are actually, instead of 50 towns and cities affected, it's actually closer to 85 after they investigated it, and that they're still ongoing. They haven't been tracked down. They haven't been prosecuted. Most of these guys have done this. This is why I'm getting the hell out of this country because, this is the most inept thing I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, it's crazy.
You and I have a question for you. So you mentioned that the Conservative Party in England, that AOC would fit in nicely, and that's how liberal it really is kind of skewed there. Do you think that can you correlate that with the idea that America is obviously on a pushback toward hyper-liberalism and, extreme liberal politics when it comes to like fighting back on transgender agenda and like the goofy stuff that politics have taken us to in America. So we're on a trend of fighting back against that. Would you say there's a correlation between where extreme liberal politics can take us in the United States and what London is seeing today?
I think that the UK, the people overwhelmingly conservative. So that's like the weirdest part. Like the Labour Party, when they got voted in, they got a majority government, but something like 19% of the country voted. So only 19% of the country gave them the majority. Just so few people voted for the Tories because they were done, right? So I actually think that there's going to be a massive shift in the way that the government functions here very soon, because I think that I think democratically there's going to be a major shift in things coming soon.
Kind of like the Trump crackdown on immigration and the huge cultural shift that Trump's trying to put in effect to fight the liberal agenda in the United States. Kind of the same thing on the horizon.
Yeah, they're going to deport.
Winkies.
Yeah, they're going to deport people like.
They relate. Like if any, I mean, we can all agree that Trump is like a disruptor in chief, right? He's disrupting the status quo, and it sounds like that's what England needs at this point.
Oh, dude, yeah, like that times 100 to be honest.
They're just afraid of being called racist. That's the problem. In England, if there's like a specific hate speech law that says, hey, it doesn't matter that you don't think somebody is racist, if the victim thinks it was racist or hate speech, it automatically is. It's the stupidest law. In America, the qualification in the law says if a reasonable person says it's hate speech, then maybe a jury would vote that because that's the condition they would have to follow. In England, it's not, it's the victim, which is the stupidest thing. I'm like, I know you guys are all sensitive, you had imperialism, you had your fucking empire, you lost it, but you can't have stupid laws like that. Canada also swung that way. Living in Canada, I can tell you that the hate speech laws lean a little bit in the direction of the UK. And because we're so close to the US, that the laws in the US make so much more sense. They just do. It's like, hey, a reasonable person, yeah, that sounds reasonable. But when you remove that condition from the law and you just start saying, hey, everybody can start saying that everything's racist, then that word loses meaning and you get evil trampling over innocent people.
Jarl says that Canada, in the chat, he says, we don't have hate speech laws, moron. That's what he said to what you're saying about Canada.
Unfortunately, we do. Yeah, unfortunately, we do. Yeah. I'll even put the reference in if you want.
Up to 5 years in prison.
Yeah, it's pretty strict actually.
Yeah, just gangs and you, and I just wanted to, I presume that you and is in the UK, but with the hate speech thing, right, as European, we kind of get a little bit exasperated with you Americans seemingly thinking that you have an absolutist position on this, and that the American definition of free speech and hate speech is the definition of hate speech and free speech. And the telling thing about what you just said, Io, in what you just said is imperialism, but if we scratch that, you know, in living memory, there was a genocidal war which was fought in Europe, and one of the reasons why that war was fought was because of the hate speech spewed by the leader of Germany for some 12 years before that. So there is a heightened sense of sensitivity, around it in Europe. And if you exclude that, then you don't understand the reason why so many European countries have laws around hate speech. Could they maybe be modified? Probably, right? But you've got to start from that position to understand it.
I agree. And if you compare the rape statistics of the year 2000 to the year 2023 and look at countries like Poland, UK, Germany, and France, I don't know what the fuck Poland is doing. I come from Poland. I'm a Polish Jew, so I agree with everything you're saying. Like, I don't tell Polish people that I'm a Jew because it makes the whole fucking conversation awkward. But yes, I agree that there's very, very bad things have happened in Europe, even in recent memory, even in the collective memory of people. But there's something to be said about, hey, when children are being raped at a disproportionate level, then something needs to happen. Either the laws need to change or England needs to leave a treaty that says, hey, they're not going to deport people even if they're criminals. That's my contention. That there is a law, a provision. I'll give you the provision in a second, but if you can comment on that, that would be...
Okay. Well, I think it's slightly conflating two things. I don't claim to be any expert on the issue of the grooming gangs in the UK. I'm no expert, so that's a big caveat I'm throwing in at the start. But the vast majority of those grooming gangs and the heinous, disgusting grooming that's going on would be done by British citizens. So saying that we're going to deport them all, there was no legal basis to deport them from Britain to anywhere else. Has there been some isolated incidents of relatively recent migrants raping girls in the UK and a certain ethnicity of a certain religion in a certain specific bit of a certain country? It really can be narrowed down, but they were British citizens.
Royfeld, before you were in the room, Ewan was talking about those rape gangs and the grooming gangs. And he said he believed that the reason the government has enabled them for so long is that liberal politics have gotten to the point where they are more worried about being...
Again, disgusting crime kind of came to the public fore was about 20 years ago. I think it was the Times newspaper that first reported on it. There were lots of local newspapers that were reporting on it, but it was suppressed by some bits of local media, and then it didn't quite make the national media because of certain sensibilities, because the pattern around this was a certain ethnicity, of a certain religion, of a certain specific bit of a certain country, and people.
What is that? What is that? What is that population? Like the certain bit. What is that for those?
Pakistani Muslims, Pakistani Muslims, I think.
Yeah, but it's more specific than that. They're from Kashmir. It's Kashmir.
Okay.
It's a specific region of Pakistan, and because of certain local community leaders, etc. These people initially, social workers were not prosecuting and going after the government, and I'm no fan of the British government, by the way, and Keir Starmer, and I'm definitely no fan of him, actually he did prosecute back in about 2010 numerous of these gangs when he was the director of public prosecutions. So we have to be slightly careful about government complicity and trying to push it underneath the carpet, because actually he didn't. However, this has been a rolling story for years, and it's terrible. There's no two ways about it. Girls were not believed because they were in care, they were poor, they were on drugs, all sorts, and people kind of pushed it underneath the carpet. That is the truth. That is the truth.
But some of the other, like, sort of what you were talking about, first off, is I think what makes me the most upset, especially after like reading some of the I guess like social workers write-ups about this, is that they weren't, it's like crazy that was the normalized language. So they were like, the other thing too is that it's not Keir Starmer, who was head of CPS at the time, that I would say is responsible for covering this up, but there are people that are in government now that are responsible. There's evidence to direct it their way. I don't know if you know who, I can't remember his last name, but this guy named Raha, who was a criminal investigator who worked with MI5 for many years. He left and became an independent journalist uncovering specifically the grooming gang. And the government has refused to, because they would essentially be investigating themselves, right? So, like, what do you do in that sort of case?
My massive caveat in this, and I said it at the start, is I'm no expert in this, and you seem to know more about the detail. One person's cover-up is another person's just benign neglect of an issue. But this, both sides of this can be true at once, in that this thing has gone on for 20 years, and every 3 months there is a case, and you just insert another British town where taxi drivers, in effect, have created this grooming gang. It's always around kind of taxi drivers as well. And on the other hand, it can be true also that actually, we've been talking about this for 20 years, almost 20 years.
Townsend Cities now, with an independent investigation, just released documents like yesterday. So I would say it is covered up. It hasn't been investigated.
Well, again, I defer to your wisdom on this, but the very fact that the first case got to the national press in about 2007 or something or another, and people were prosecuted back in 2010, says to me slightly otherwise. But I take your point about a joined-up investigation that looks at the national-wide patterns of this and who was where when these cases came to their desk, and people were prosecuted, but the systematic failure of social services, but also the police on the ground when the first complaints were made in various cities, and what we can learn from that. All right, so I think the two opposite things can be true. It's not exactly a cover-up. However, will pour some light onto this disgusting episode.
Good morning, guys.
This is content serendipity. We're creating content. Good for us.
Good morning, Holly. I'm listening. But man, I don't know, guys. I don't know where to go. I feel like, are we safe anywhere anymore? I don't know. Sometimes, is America? Should we all just get the fuck out of here?
Well, you're safer from sexual crimes in America than you are in England, and you're safer from gun crimes in England than you are in America.
Well, I'd rather be raped than my children be killed at their school.
Oh, well then America's perfect for you. No, I'm sorry. England's perfect for you. It's backwards. Backwards. You need to move to England.
I know that's fucked up, but I'm for real.
These are the questions now, right? Like, where do I want to live? Do I want to get raped, or do I want my kids to get killed in school?
It's crazy because the little girl who was like, hey, stay away from my sister, she's only 12. She got arrested. Not the guy who was calling them sexy, but the girl who was like, yo, stay away from me. So this is weird that we're taking those kind of priorities. Like, I want to ask really hard questions, but it's like, than the people who are from that culture are saying, no, it's not a migrant issue, it's a definition of the word rape. When a little girl feels that she has to swing an axe and a knife, I don't care what your beliefs are, something is wrong, fucking fix it.
That's exactly what Ewan said earlier.
Did something new happen in the UK that I may have missed that brought this conversation?
Yeah, a little Scottish girl. If you just look up Scottish girl in
England, and we had somebody from Georgia talking about wanting to live in England, and Ewan was saying, you don't want to live in England, it's a disaster. And then he started giving details about the rape groups and things like that, and a lot of us didn't know about that. So we got really in depth to it. We started looking up, doing some research, and we found that England is...
What happened with the Scottish person with the knife? The Scottish girl?
Yeah, so just from what I know, and if somebody knows more, then please correct me. But a little Scottish girl with her sister walking on the street, her sister gets approached by this migrant, and he's kind of trying to, engage them in some way, talk to them that they're sexy or whatever. And supposedly, what happened was that this is not the first time that this has happened, and so they're much more vigilant about protecting themselves. And so I'm just going and really don't know what happened after that. The kind of video cuts off, but apparently one of the girls ended up in the hospital, according to some reports. Now, it'd have to be confirmed, but that's kind of like that there was this, hey, migrants take priority because we can't be racist. Seems to be the story. I'd like to be wrong,
I don't think. Listen, I'm going to check out of this conversation because I fully appreciate that. You know, there's no two ways about it. This terrible grooming gangs thing did happen in the UK. Is probably still happening somewhere, and we need a root and branch torchlight on it as to the reasons why things got so bad. But you know, if the conversation started with don't go live in Britain because you're going to get raped, you know, it's like, come on now, right? And you know, I'm proud to say that I come from there for 9 years. I think we have a better work-life balance than in America. We have a low overall cost of living. You know, I could go on. America's a wonderful place, right? But if the conversation started, well, you know, you're going to get shot in America or you're going to get raped. I am not saying that Britain is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But anyway, yeah, thank you for indulging me and letting me on the stage.
The conversation didn't start that way. That was my sarcastic commentary 3 minutes ago.
All right, Mike.
The conversation started by Ewan giving us actual facts about what's going on over in England, which sounds pretty fucking messed up because we pulled up some statistics and saw that the UK is the top of the entire world of countries for amount of sex crimes, and it used to be Sweden. The UK is doubled Sweden in the last little bit of time, so it seems like it is a very serious problem, and you know, whether or not we want to talk about it, it has political implications based on the liberal politics that have allowed, apparently, it sounds like a government to largely turn its nose to some serious issues because it made of the political implications of being called racist, which I think is a fascinating concept because the United States was kind of heading that direction, and Trump disrupted a lot of that by saying, you know what, our liberal politics are going a little bit too far. We can't have men and women's sports. We can't focus on transgender issues as a number one priority. And, you know, not every white person is racist when they call out statistics.
Hey, Royfield, question for you. Are these the rape gangs, are they happening in Ireland? I feel like I don't hear about it there.
I have no
Stage then, because the reason I ask is I was there recently for a couple weeks, and I had been there 20 years prior, almost 15, 20, and I don't recall it being near as multicultural as when I saw it, and mostly when why?
I'll just quickly answer you, Holly, then I'm going to bounce out of the room. Immigration into Ireland is a relatively recent phenomenon. So if you look at the mass migration of people from the island of Ireland, it's the potato famine in the 1840s, and Ireland has been a net exporter of people ever since. The population of Ireland, this is kind of from memory, so don't exactly quote me on this, but United Kingdom was, I think, something like 10, something like that. The population of the island of Ireland is now 6 million, still 180 years later, whilst the population of the rest of the UK is 65 million. It shows you how much people left Ireland because of the potato famine in the 1840s. So hence you have the massive Irish population in Canada, in America, in places like Philadelphia, 90s. People left Ireland. If you were young and you had a family, you left Ireland, primarily actually to the UK. So my home city of Birmingham, massive Irish population, so much so that you don't even think about it. But 30% of the white folks in Birmingham, my hometown, Irish descent. So the reason why I mention all that is when I went to Ireland, purely anecdotally, in 1996 for the first time, I was literally stopped in the street because I was black, because you just didn't see non-white migrants in Ireland. Since accession to the EU and with the Irish economy doing really well, in the early 2000s, you got lots of European migrants to places like Dublin and non-white Irish folks, non-white immigrants, going to Ireland. So now we are seeing first and second generation non-white Irish people, and it is incredibly common to go to sort of like Cork or Limerick and see somebody who's black or brown who has an Irish accent and will call themselves Irish. It's a relatively recent thing, unlike in the UK, where places like London, but in terms of the mass wave of migration to the UK, so in the last census, 18% of people in the United Kingdom are non-white, and that fundamentally stems from 1948. Ireland is much more recent.
Thank you. Ewan, did you want to chime in?
Oh yeah, I was going to agree with Royfield. I think like what's going on in Ireland right now, from what I've seen, is that because Ireland is still part of the EU, like the Republic of Ireland is still part of the EU. They still go by the EU law and stuff like that. So issues in Ireland that have been arising has been illegal migration because they're part of the EU and they have to run by the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights laws. There have been issues where they've been setting up these like huge migrant camps like all over Ireland, of the town. It's an incredibly tiny island. It's even smaller than the UK, and they've seen a massive influx very quickly of immigration. And some of it good, some of it bad. You know, that's just the reality of it. I mean, with places like Scotland, for example, it's starting to turn out that there were and are still active grooming gangs in Scotland. So I mean, it's like incredibly complex what's going on here. But part of it is the fact that we don't have statistics because the government hasn't investigated yet. We don't have police reports because the police haven't reported on it. So that's kind of the issue that the UK is facing also, is that there's one that just got released, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago, that you can, choose to believe or not. But the government has essentially been forced into a national investigation into the grooming gangs because something called the Casey report came out, highlighting the importance of doing a national investigation as it has been actively covered up.
So do you think that Ireland and Scotland could end up going down the road that Britain finds themselves in? Or do you think that they will?
Yeah, I mean, Scotland is part of the UK, right? So same laws, same national government. Essentially, they do have sort of a separate government, but it's still essentially it's Westminster that's looking called a shot. So yeah, I mean, I think it's starting to happen out there. I think that we're starting to see a lot of like migration happening in Scotland, but I mean, like England, it's been happening for years in sort of the main cities and towns like Glasgow, Edinburgh. Dundee is the town where. But I think the part that makes it the most complex is the fact that we haven't had proper investigations into this yet, and essentially what the British people are the most upset about isn't the acts themselves; it's the actual cover-up from the government to police, to even the caretakers that are supposed to look after these girls. I think that is what the British people or people in the UK are like the most angry about, is the active cover-up, and still being covered up in ways, and it's still active. There's still active grooming gangs going on, even though it's probably one of the number one things talked about in this country. So yeah, it's a really, really dark, sad situation going on here.
Do you think Ireland, not Northern Ireland, but Ireland that's not, under UK rule, can they curb this before it becomes do they have more autonomy, I guess? I know they're influenced a lot by Britain. I don't know how much can they be spared?
No.
I guess.
No. So Northern Ireland is under UK law, and they are actively actually moving migrants to Northern Ireland. I know that there was was recently a huge riot where they burnt down 3 houses in Ballymena because a girl raped by 3 migrant boys. They were underage too. They were underage. But this is the thing, is that it's not like really focused on race or anything like that. The girl who got raped was a mixed ethnic, like half African, half Irish girl. I think the locals care about the Irish, and they're worried about what's happening to specifically underage girls. And the thing about the Irish that's a little bit different from the English culturally is that the Irish actually go out and riot much more than the English do. I think the English are a little bit more passive with this stuff. So yeah, you saw huge amounts of violence when that riot happened. And yeah, I mean, I would say that the entirety of the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland is all in like a really weird state right now. I mean, the other thing that's interesting in Ireland that I could highlight is that the Catholics and the Protestants have actually in marches. Is pretty wild because if you lived in Ireland, that would not normally be the case.
I go down the rabbit hole, like dreaming about leaving. And Ireland right now is like probably top of my list. But then there's this. So I don't know. There's always something that makes me think twice.
Yeah, I mean it's a really sad state of affairs here. I mean, this is the thing, is that I could get a work visa out in the U.S. and just move my family out there. I live in the U.K. And that's what I think we're gonna have to do. To be honest, I think that the U.S. is possible for what's happening there to happen in the U.S. But with that being said, you guys have to be like really, really the little rumbles starting. And I feel like the UK is generally about 10 years ahead with social movements, whether it's people that we agree with or disagree with. So I would say you guys got to pay attention to what's going on in the UK, because it very likely could happen in the US as well. I think that you guys are safer because of your constitution. And safety.
So specifically what you're saying is
actually, sorry, the First Amendment and the Second Amendment together. Yeah, because free speech in the UK is gone.
Are you saying we're safer because we have guns?
I mean, yes, partially, but also the First Amendment, you have it in your constitution. Free speech. We don't have free speech here. This is the problem, is that people that speak out about this get imprisoned all the time. They're in this country, in the UK, last year there were over 12,000 people arrested and in jail for social media posts.
I thought you also said that there are demonstrations every day about this.
Of course, yeah. People are still allowed to protest. But you have to understand how people are freaking out, yeah. But I mean, there's people being arrested left and right over this stuff too. There's lots of people being arrested during these demonstrations. There was a guy who yelled at a police officer, Axel Ruda-Cabana, who murdered 3 girls in cold blood at a Taylor Swift dance party thing, and it's like a horrible story. And this older gentleman who's retired, he yelled at a police officer.
Wait, hang on a second.
And he got arrested.
For the Taylor Swift concert?
No, the Taylor Swift dance party. It was like a little neighborhood thing. Multiple, I think 8 girls got stabbed, 3 were murdered. He almost beheaded one of the girls. They were like under the age of 10. Axel Ruda-Cabana.
Who is that?
He is a Welsh choir boy from Rwanda. But that's how the government portrayed him as. They called him a Welsh choir boy and murders 3 girls. That's how all the news stories portrayed it. And then when his picture came out, because he became 18 right afterwards, everybody's like, yeah, Welsh choir boy. And just look his name up, you'll see. You'll see the picture. But there's a guy, I mean, this is just one example of many. who he yelled at a police officer, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison just for yelling at him.
The killer, was he born in England or in UK?
I believe that he was born in Wales, but he was the son of 2 Rwandan refugees.
So he's Welsh if he's born in Wales, right?
Yeah, of course. He's a Welshman.
Are you being ironic?
Sort of. But yeah, technically he's a Welshman, sure. I wouldn't say he's ethnically a Welshman. But, you know, his background is Rwandan. But
You mean his parents are Rwandan?
wait, do you think that and I had a child there with my wife who were both not Chinese. Would you say that I am a Chinese child?
I cannot speak to China. I can speak to America because I'm American.
Yeah, I mean, America is a bit different because America is like a few hundred years old, and I actually think that, becoming an American is actually like a really great thing. But I mean, like the English and the Welsh and the Scots have like a 2,000-year history. So it would be sort of like in that, I would say British. I would say that he was a British man. Yeah. I wouldn't say he's necessarily ethnically Welsh though.
I don't know what ethnically Welsh is.
Well, they have a huge history that spans thousands of years. You can look up Wales.
I understand that, but you seem to be resentful, basically, that they called a black guy Welsh because he was black. Well, they were being ironic again. That's what they
after killing 3 girls and stabbing 8 others.
It's meant to be lurid. It's meant to be tabloid.
Okay, he's going to be our national news presenter and be a tabloid, and I don't think that they should be getting public funding.
Why?
If they're going to be a tabloid, fine. Be a tabloid, do what you want. But if they're going to actually try to provide accurate coverage of the situation, then I would say that they probably shouldn't be getting national funding.
I don't know. Does BBC get national funding? The rest don't. I mean,
they were trying to minimize public anger. Okay, that is what they have been.
Right?
It took them 3 months to put the picture up.
So the day after this happened, it's because he's a kid?
No, nobody knew what he looked like. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew anything for months.
Because he was a minor?
Yeah, he was 17. He turned 18 literally like a week ago. He didn't show the picture because of the public backlash, which did happen, which I don't agree with. I don't think that you should go out and riot in a horrible situation like that. I'm totally against that.
I think what Ewan is pointing to is a trend with the media, and that happens in our country also. In fact, it did yesterday with the school shooter yesterday, where the media will lie by omission when the narrative doesn't fit what they want the narrative to be. So,
I mean, it took about 5 minutes for me to find out that he was a transgender person.
Yeah, but look at CNN, the New York Times, all their stories yesterday, they weren't talking about that at all. The other transgender...
It wasn't even a day, it wasn't even an hour. And we got the manifesto.
Okay, so there was another shooter who was, this whole thing about every time there is a shooter and the left tries to say, it was a right-wing nut, and the right tries to say, it was a left-wing nut, that needs to end, because it's clearly more nuanced and complicated than that, and they're just mental people, but so it doesn't need to be a political football. But when you are a media editor, you should be posing to your reporters and your journalists, what are the natural questions that your viewer or reader are going to ask? And if you're leaving out things like, by the way, there's a huge meta trend that first-generation immigrants to England are exponentially more likely to commit crimes against persons. And by the way, you failed to mention that in the story, but if the perpetrator was white, that's in the headline every single time, then while you may not be directly purporting a lie, you're certainly crafting the narrative to fit the pre-existing narrative that you want to put out.
Thank you, Rizzo. Yeah, specifically that. He eloquently said my exact thoughts.
It's important that the person is transgender. It's interesting. If it's important, or again, I don't know if it's important that the guy was black. Is black.
I mean, maybe it is. Maybe they're taking drugs that disrupt the natural endocrine systems in a person's body, and that affects more than just their physiology, and it affects their psychology.
Well, Eleanor was on a call, but even though he's on the call, for the rest of the room, I do want to clarify this as well. Part of the reason why it was important that we found out that he was the son of Rwandan refugees is the fact that he had been, we have investigated people to try to stop things like this from happening. He was referred to prevent 3 times before he did this mass stabbing of police, a Taylor Swift dance party, thing. And in his writings, when he was in high school, he talked about how the Rwandan genocide should have never happened, and that the genocide should have been here. He said that multiple times. This is something this kid got sent to prevent 3 times and refused to investigate it, and then he goes to a party with children and he murders 3 of them and nearly beheads one of them. Like, to me, come on. Like, this is important stuff to talk about. The fact that the government failed so miserably in their basic duty of care to look after these girls whose lives are, they're either dead, or the girls who got stabbed whose lives are forever changed. Like, this is basic stuff.
Ewan, I don't know if you guys talked about this before I got here, but I don't think most people in America know what the grooming gangs are in the UK and in Europe. I certainly didn't until you and I actually talked about it at one point.
It's starting to be talked about. I mean, I've been noticing, I listen to a lot of U.S. news and stuff like that. I can pay attention to what's going on in the U.S. And I've been seeing, I think even Fox was talking about it. But I'm starting to see, a major shift of Americans starting to look in our direction. And I know it's not everyone. I know that there's a lot of people that still need to be sort of educated on it. But I really, really think that the microscope is starting to be put on the UK here. And it's really important that people do look into this and you tell your friends or things like that. The rates of it that have gone through the roof in the past few years. It's also the fact that the government is trying to put people who speak out about it.
Right, so if you weren't here, I had noted while Ewan was talking, the only reason why I know about it is because, I spend an unhealthy amount of time on Twitter. And there are a lot, there are a lot of accounts of people, UK-based people, Londoners, British folks, families who are directly impacted, families who film their family members being arrested for, either protesting against the groomer gang, speaking out, being directly impacted because of loved ones. And not only that, you have a lot of people documenting what they call the 2-tier police system, where you have a lot of natural-born citizens being arrested for just doing something as simple as praying in public. You can't pray in public in some of these areas, according to testimonies being shared. Also being arrested for things you post on social media. Social media is using certain words, and seemingly these words aren't seemingly offensive, but the government has decided the citizens are not allowed to react. You got to be very careful. They police the language very heavily over there, seemingly. So you're right. The mainstream media isn't really covering this. You have to follow, kind of social media accounts, be on certain platforms, follow alternative news to really get the tea about what's going on, and it's very disturbing.
I kind of felt that hesitation in Roy felt when he was here. He really wouldn't go there. It was super awkward because he acknowledged that it existed, but he wouldn't go anything deeper than that. And then he chose to leave the room when it started getting real specific. It was really awkward. I really felt like
like the blanket of censorship on the way that he responded emotionally and the things he said. Like he was like it was awkward.
See, and I kind of, it's funny that you mentioned that because I was really paying attention to the Royfield reaction as well. And, you know, I adore you, but like it made me think like, well, maybe this is specific to like, maybe it's just really bad in the region where Ewan's at, but it's not like really considered a common thought process by a lot. Because Royfield almost felt like he was being attacked, like the UK was being attacked.
He's black.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, you're saying that he felt like the UK was being attacked. I would say he felt more like black people were being attacked. And I think that if there was any defensive tone in his voice, it was probably because he felt like, hey, it's not all black people. I don't think that he identified. I don't think he was defensive as a Britishman. I think he was defensive as a black man.
Well, but Nye had already had that conversation and addressed the room that she was talking specifically about Muslims.
I can sort of explain it to you because it's actually not a skin color thing. I think that he's actually just much more left wing, and I think that there's like essentially just like the U.S. a major culture war that's going on in the UK as well, and it's like to actively cover up the victims of this stuff. I'm not saying he would. I'm not for that. I'm definitely not putting those words in his mouth, by the way. But in that case, like I have seen tons of videos, and I know black men personally who would probably stand with the, flag wavers, waving the English flag because that is their culture. That's what they were raised in, and they don't want girls in their communities to be attacked like this. So, I mean, it's not really a racial thing. It's more of a political differences thing.
Can I jump in for just a quick second? I love, Royfield's a great guy. I don't mean to disparage him in any way, but I think his hesitance and reluctance to address the issue head on is, it illustrates actually a lot of the same themes and patterns that were discovered in the inquiry that was done in the grooming gangs cover up. And that, the main one being that it's not always people. I think this is what's hard to accept is that a lot of the worst things happen from people who are the best intentions. So it's not people like actively trying to cover things up, but there's a discomfort, particularly among those who are on the political left, with acknowledging ugly stuff especially when it really. I do think it actually does involve race, but not in a way that was suggested by my friend. I think the way it involves race is anytime there are patterns that emerge, people particularly on the left, are extremely uncomfortable with acknowledging it. And I just want to really quickly read some of the key findings from the report. There's safeguarding children, turning a blind eye to abuse rather than intervening. There's persistent reluctance to record or confront the ethnicity of perpetrators. In fact, data on it was often omitted or obscured due to fears of being labeled racist or inflaming tensions. Significant overrepresentation of suspects from Asian and Hispanic backgrounds, but this was ignored or downplayed at the national level because the data collection systems were weak and incomplete. And so I think that's the main issue here, and I think that's where we see some of that from our speaker who left the room.
Gotcha.
And that's the Casey report. That's the report that I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
Where it's the report that dragged essentially our current government kicking and screaming to do a national investigation finally after they had said no to two previous ones.
And I commented in the chat on the next girl. I know we're talking about two different places. Grooming gangs primarily being the UK and the nice willing girl in Dundee, Scotland. My only point about that, Ewan, is I did a little bit of digging into it, and it looks like the guy who's recording the video, who's allegedly this migrant who's going after young girls,
he was with his wife at the time. Apparently, reports are he was the one doing the recording. In my experience, the guys going around scouting, cruising for young girls usually aren't the ones who are pulling out their phones and recording. All I was saying there is that story and that image of that girl holding the knife went so viral so fast. Everyone superimposed their narrative that they wanted to be true on her, by the way, including myself initially. And I just think it's important to peel one layer to be different. It actually risks undermining the real legitimate issues like the grooming gang story that we're discussing.
AJ, okay, so respectfully, I agree with you pretty much entirely. I agree that we have to wait for more information to come out with this, but there are two different sides going on at the same time, right? So I did do digging as well.
Yeah, two sides for sure.
And so one of the girls' moms made a statement out to people saying that there was actually 3 girls involved. That man did go up to one of them. And that this had happened to them multiple times, hence why the girl was carrying the weapons. And that the third girl actually had gone to call the police. And that's why she's not in the video. But there were 3 girls involved in the entirety of it. Okay. And the girl who didn't have the knife and actually ended up in the hospital with a concussion and a major bump on her head because the guy physically attacked her.
Interesting.
There's a hospital report that comes out.
No, sure. By the way, I'm not challenging it. I'm not challenging it. I actually don't have my mind yet on the story. So that's interesting. I didn't know that information. Thanks for sharing that. But I think you and I would both, because it's like a great way to advance the narrative. And I just worry about that sometimes because it can actually end up undermining. But in this case, it might just be the case. And I didn't have those facts. So thanks.
Yeah, I think having the facts is. Oh, sorry, you go second.
Well, I was just gonna say, we don't necessarily get all the facts before we express our fake outrage. You know, and so I do. I just wanted to know. I think that's an important point because I see it way more so in the Republican Party than I do the.
Yeah, I just wanted to say as well with the girl with the knife in the neck, I think like part of the reason it's so viral in the UK because everybody in the UK is obviously talking about it too. And there's like people that stream and talk about politics here that I listen to and follow. I think the reason why it went so viral is the fact that the overall message that little girls are carrying around knives and axes to protect themselves because the police won't do anything for them is sort of the overall message that's being spread. That's like the issue at hand is that they don't feel safe, especially working class girls. If they're coming from working class backgrounds, they don't feel safe because the police will not respond to their pleas for help. And that's like what made everybody in the UK just like live it and have that story.
Well, and honestly, this was just a tactic to shut Jarl down in the chat, which it did. The 2021 statistics for U.S. children murdered was just under 2,000. I think it was 1,750 or something. If I'm being liberal with that number, and I say, let's say on average, 2,000 children a year are murdered in the U.S., the statistics on rape in the UK for minors is 60,000 over the course of, I think, 5 years. So even if I said that same 5-year period, 10,000 U.S. children murdered, he was grossly wrong. So I think that says...
I'm seeing a trend about him being grossly wrong. Statistics. I'm sorry.
He's grossly wrong per capita.
Yes, per capita.
Per capita.
Of course, we're all the ones that apparently don't understand what per capita means, but he's grossly wrong on it.
A little bit left and right this morning, earlier in the room. He came up and wanted to be spicy.
It was pretty scathing, actually. I was like, damn.
his argument style is just to rouse the other side and not actually make a salient point.
Well, what cracks me up is how once he's proven incorrect, how he moves the bar like so. Double is horrible, and it's like, wait a second, right? Will you please acknowledge that you doubled the double already?
Just exactly what I said. Just meant to frustrate you.
Oh, it works. That's why I just shut up.
I think what I wish the Royfields of the world would understand is by continuing to refuse to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is mainly there are significant cultural issues at play here. You're actually going to make life way worse for these Indians in Pakistan. I mean, look at me, right? Like for people who look like me. And there is a way of addressing this issue head on that can be done in a reasonable way that acknowledges, it's not all brown people, right? But there are some serious cultural issues at play here that we have to tackle. Are going to be people who aren't going to handle it reasonably. They're going to be the people who aren't afraid of being called racist. And I don't think you want those people making the policy. So you neglect this issue at your peril.
Yeah, no, totally valid point. I mean, my next door neighbor here, him and his wife, they're basically fresh off the boat from Pakistan, and we get along great. You know, we have chats all the time. I would never judge all Pakistanis for what has happened with the grooming gangs in the UK. I think it's really important to focus on the actual issue at hand, which is that this specific group of men should all be prosecuted and deported and sent to prison and, punished and I would say publicly flogged at this point. But that wouldn't change my view of my neighbor. It's like, well, obviously I would never think that way. So I mean, you gotta have a cool head with this stuff. You can't just generalize everyone in these cases. And I mean, this is the problem with the specific problem at hand. You can't call everybody the same thing if they come from the same background. You can't call all Pakistanis. Importantly, I think that what the people in the UK are angriest about, and I think that this is being misunderstood or purposely, put in the media, is that I don't think that the ethnically English people are angry at the Pakistanis. I think they're angry at the government for actively covering this up for so long. That's the anger.
I mean, I think it's a good old saying of that you import to the third world, you become the third world. And it's not that Pakistani and, it's not like everyone who's from Pakistan are bad people, but again, it's like, what country are you coming from? What type of culture have you guys created there? And, in Pakistan, they have a culture where, rape is okay for the most part. It's highly accepted.
Right, Alex, I think that in this case, so I disagree. So I think that what has gone wrong in this specific and prosecute them for pedophilia on mass amounts of children. They actively covered it up. That is the problem at hand, specifically with the Pakistan grooming gangs in the UK.
But by the way, I just real quick, I think a part of this is also that we don't often mention is I think, tell me if you disagree, but one less spoken about aspect of this is that a lot of these white younger girls were from lower classes, and there was some interactions with police that seemed to signal that they kind of didn't give a fuck about them, because they're like, what are you doing out there at night? With fears of being labeled racism and inflaming racial tensions if it got out. Like if they actually arrested these guys and went forward with it and the stories got out that there were these brown guys going around raping white girls, what that would do in the community. There's a lot going on that caused this cover up, and all of it is terrible.
Yeah, I did want to make a quick point. is AJ, you're 100% right, and I forgot to bring this point up earlier, is that as an outsider living in the UK, watching, how everybody behaves around me and stuff like that, I feel like the upper middle class and stuff like that, where they really look down on these people. And I've heard people make these quips and here and there, like, all the time about working class people in this country, and that's the other issue too. So there's a very definitive class system. Like, for me, being from Canada, it's like my neighbor was like, blue collar, and I came from like a more white collar family, and like, the working class versus like the middle class all sort of like combined, and like we never really like, the class wasn't a huge thing. I mean, obviously in every country it's still there a little bit, but in the UK it's very distinct. And I think that a huge issue with the grooming gangs is the fact that most of the victims,
working class from troubled backgrounds who were perhaps already in the social services system, perhaps missing one parent or even both parents, also possibly with drug problems and so forth. I'm reading about this now. And they seem to have
see some of the comments in the chat voicing some frustration about the cultural component of this, because I think if we're being honest with ourselves, it's not just make sure to prosecute. There's another issue here, and it's something that is very difficult to grapple with. I don't know what the answer is, because I don't think the immigration is going away anytime soon. I mean, I'm an immigrant, okay? And there are some cultural issues that are starting to become apparent. There is, for example, a nude beach that I frequent and that I've been going for years, and there are rules there.
Oh, I don't mean to dox you, you're in Canada, right?
That's right, yeah. So
I'm from Canada, I know all about that nude beach.
Okay, so in recent years, I'm sure you've seen this yourself, there are groups, like big groups of Indian men who come down to this beach fully clothed. Okay, they don't even have a beach blanket, which signals to me they're not there to sit down and have a good time at the beach. And they do walkthroughs. So that they can, and then they stare, like totally without shame, just staring at the women. I've had to confront these men, sometimes while in the nude, and it's made for a funny scene. And tell them to put their phones away, stop taking photos, stop looking at these women. And women have come up to me, with me and my wife while we're there, thanking us for intervening. It's getting really bad, and a part of it's like not even their fault. Like, they're just from a completely different world. Like, imagine you come from a world like that, and then you walk into a beach and there's like all these women just laying around. It would fucking blow your mind. So a part of me doesn't even blame them for staring, but at the same time, we've got to figure out as a society.
I mean, I think, but I do, AJ, I think where things go off and where things go wrong is that I think that every country has, to a certain extent, a certain native culture, and I think that it's really important.
The biggest hurdle to that is that this obsession with like, look, when my family immigrated here, we assimilated. And we were proud to assimilate. And it didn't mean that we have to abandon every aspect of our culture and language. We didn't. I still speak Farsi. But we understood that when you come into somebody's house and the rules of the house are you take your shoes off, that's what you do. And we're very grateful, very lucky to be here. And we're very happy to do that. So when that starts going away because there's some new ideology that's, well, no, there's no longer going to be shared unified values, customs and norms. It's just everything goes because it's a beautiful multicultural place. I mean, that's chaos. So I don't know how to deal with this. Like, part of me is like, should there be?
I actually think that all you need to do to fix the situation is, I mean, in the UK, for example, is just end, for example, this is like a big one that could probably fix most of the problems, is end welfare for foreign nationals. Like, we're putting billions of dollars into like welfare for people who are coming here and going on welfare, which is crazy to me. You should be bringing in people that add to your economy, not people that become a net drain on your economy, right? So you close all those loopholes, and you fix probably about 80% of the entire problem right there.
Yeah, and I'm also, a part of me is also wondering if the class of immigrant has changed in recent years. By the way, even amongst my own people, I've noticed a difference. I've noticed a trend in terms of the type of Iranian who comes into Canada. It seems to be of a lower class element that didn't exist before. It used to be harder to get into the country. Like you used to have to meet certain thresholds and hurdles to get in. And I'm thinking, full of immigrants, and in so doing, brought in a different class of immigrant. In other words, low-skilled. My group in that, just so people don't think I'm trying to target another group, in the immigration policy in that respect as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're correct. I think it's like Canada used to have, like, in my opinion, the best immigration system in the world. And Trudeau essentially changed the entire immigration system and allowed for loopholes. For example, like, the student visa situation where there's 400,000, or no, I think it was even higher. It's like 800,000 students that work at, like, low-wage jobs, which in their case they were making so much more money than where they would have.
And not to talk over you, but when you talk about those kind of immigration figures into Canada, you have to mention the total population of Canada, because most Americans are surprised at how relatively small the population of Canada is. It's, for reference, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, maybe this total population of the size of, like, the New York and Boston region combined, and that's about it.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt for, I not at all want to shift the conversation to Canada. I know how much Americans hate talking about Canada and other countries, but I was using it as an illustration for what I see be a cultural clash that I see everywhere. For the people in the chat who are saying every man's theirs, you just don't understand what the norms are at this particular beach that I'm talking about, because you're not there. When you have just picture a pack of 9 to 12 men fully clothed in jeans and long sleeves, walking up to your blanket as you lay there nude and just gawking at you. It's absolutely unheard of at this beach, and it's a massive problem. And it requires guys like me to unfortunately have to get up and police it to keep it under control, where I wish there'd be some other kind of enforcement mechanism for this kind of thing. I just don't know how to grapple with it, because you know what? Most people don't do what I do. Most people just keep their head down, especially white people.
Yes, I mean, what I've heard specifically about Indian immigration into Canada is it's something in the order of 2 million people over the last several years. And when you talk about the population of Canada being somewhere around 30 million total, imagine 10% of the country was just imported from one specific region in just the last few years. What that does to especially housing stock in the big metropolitan areas. I've been reading about, what this was a cliche in New York for many years, but a 1-bedroom apartment where maybe 7 people are living. And, when you talk about sort of, to be crude, the horny Indian boys who are going to the nude beaches to ogle women, like, they may be just, this is true in India also, just young men. They have no privacy to themselves because they're in such overcrowded housing conditions. They're just fucking young and horny. And there was nothing like that in their society. And they can just go and sort of, get their jollies by just ogling women on the beach. And it's definitely, a cultural clash at best, and someone who respects the work of Dr. Jack Cruz. I wish I could sun my nether regions, but I just since then.
Increase what? Where?
In terms of the migrant population, annual immigration trends from India, from in Canada. So I think permanent residents, it was like 32,000 in 2013, and then it went up to 139,000 in 2023. Projected growth, it just keeps going up, 148,000, more than 4 times.
They're saying that it's too risky to go out because, like, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to be pulled in. That's the issue. Like,
Yeah.
it's not that.
Trump said permanent residents aren't allowed to leave the country, right? That's fucking insane.
It's kind of I don't know if he even said that, but that's the same what my lawyer told me. My lawyer was like, hey, we recommend don't leaving the country for a little bit. So just so that until you get a citizenship, and then you can, like, go ahead.
Not just conservatives, but Republicans, MAGA Republicans, crying because, oh, I shouldn't say that, that's too pejorative. I'm fascinated by their outcry because a person was fired by his employer for behaving in a way. Oh, I'm sorry. Julio said that he was pressured to resign. It was under duress. That this person experienced consequences for behavior that he participated in online, things that he said online. It's like, are y'all new to being Negroes? When did Black people who call themselves conservative lose sight of the fact that if you want to keep your good job, you better be on your P's and Q's. And if you give people one little sliver opening to make you a target or to quote unquote force you out or whatever, even though I don't really believe that man, like I do believe that he's just doing that so he can like raise some money with GoFundMe or whatever. That your employer is going to take it because you are a Negro in the workplace. All of that crying, it's immoral. You think that's morally just? You think that's ethical? You're a Negro. Like, what's going on? Since when? And since when would y'all embrace the idea that actions have consequences? You exercised your free speech. Your employer said, ew, we don't like that. They told you to stop doing it. You still did it. Those are your consequences. So I'm just saying, all of this, they like everything but the actions have consequences part of conservatism.
Well, that's the key. I mean, you don't even have to go to the racial aspect of it. They seem to have lost that's just a conservative principle, if that makes sense. That's just a conservative principle. Actions have consequences. That's what's odd about the whole thing. You don't have to go to, you don't know the history of your people. I mean, you don't know everything Trump is saying. Even more fundamentally, there's the conservative actions have consequences. When you do things in the public sphere, it can affect your life. It can affect your livelihood. That's the whole ball game in part.
You know, I told Julio in the other room, I said, you guys are the ones always arguing for unrestricted liberty. You want the liberty to hang out with who you want to. You want the liberty to go wherever you want. You want the liberty to make decisions. And here's an employer exercising its liberty, and you're mad about it. That's the problem. Yeah. Conservatives, they talk about liberty all the time. And I said, the privilege to work is not wanted that without limitation. it is true that in the workplace you do have some rights. But if an employer isn't disciplining you for reasons that are illegal, the employer is fine. And the guy, it seems, just didn't want to shut up. He wanted to keep on talking. They told him they didn't like what he said. And they probably told him that moving forward, they expect him to do X and avoid doing Y. And he said no. And then they said that in 2025, conservatives are the ones getting canceled all the time. And the folks on the left are not being canceled. I pointed them to Claudia Gay. And I said, consider how she was treated. She was embarrassed, humiliated. She was stripped of some job responsibilities that were major, all because she didn't share Trump's views on a particular subject. So she was canceled.
Yeah. So my thing is that and whatever, with very little consideration. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm far away from the phone. With very little consideration of how living in the world as a Negro, as a Black, means that the proliferation of those racist discourses, which turn into public policy, will also limit your ability to exercise your individual liberties and freedoms. There's just not the racial analysis